This presentation is a benefit for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. To learn more about the fund and to donate, please go to the website address, which will be at the bottom of the screen. I'm gonna write my stories down. Ain't nobody gonna stop me now. Keeping my eyes on the prize, and I'm holding on.
We wear the mask that grins and lies.
It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile.
With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with a myriad of subtleties.
Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs?
Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask.
We smile, but oh great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise.
We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and the long mile.
But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask.
We wear the mask.
We wear the mask.
Hello, I'm Bil Wright, and Black Writers Matter. Black culture has had a profound impact on what is known as American culture. In fact, there would be no American culture without Black culture. No Fred Astaire without the Nicholas brothers. No Janis Joplin without Big Mama Thornton. And long before Madonna learned how to spell the word Vogue, Black men and women were playing with gender identity and voguing in high drag in the 20s up in Harlem's Hamilton Lodge, number 710. In 1992, Tupac recorded Holla If You Hear Me, speaking to why rap is a potent expression of rage and protest for the Black American.
I make a rhyme pay, others make crime pay. Whatever it takes to live and stand, cause nobody else will give a damn. So we live like caged beasts, waiting for the day to let the rage free. Still me, they kill me. I love it when they fear me.
In 2005, white rapper Macklemore releases an apology for what rap has become.
I see so many people lost who really try to pretend, but I'm just another white boy who has caught on to the trend. When I take a step to the mic, is hip hop closer to the end? Because when I go to shows, the majority have white skin. They marketed the windmill, the air flare, and headspin, and white rappers' albums really get the most spins. The face of hip hop has changed a lot since Eminem. And if he's taking away Black artists' profits, I look just like him. Claim to.
Tonight, we are honoring the authentic voices of Black writers from Paul Laurence Dunbar to Zora Neale Hurston to later 20th century writers, including Pat Parker, James Baldwin, Lucille Clifton, and Audrey Lord. We opened with Paul Laurence Dunbar, who was born in 1872 and died 33 years later. In that time, he produced some of the most well-known works in the American literary canon. His signature work perhaps is We Wear the Mask, as profound now as it was when it was first published in 1896. Zora Neale Hurston is perhaps best known for her classic Their Eyes Were Watching God. Reportedly, it was written in 7 weeks in 1937 and published in September of the same year. even though the publishing business was more challenging than it is now, especially for Black writers. Hurston published poetry, novels, and plays. The Black literary community was sometimes shocked and not always supportive of what she wrote about her feelings as a Black woman. But Hurston was bold, even reckless to some. Reportedly, she was steely in her determination to be not just a good writer, but a famous one. And if that meant a little scandal, well, then bring it on. Zora Neale Hurston's How It Feel to Be Colored Me.
I am colored, but I offer nothing in the way of extenuating circumstances except the fact that I am the only Negro in the United States whose grandfather on the mother's side was not an Indian chief.
I remember the very day that I became colored. Up to my 13th year, I lived in the little Negro town of Eatonville, Florida. It is exclusively a colored town. The only white people I knew passed through the town going to or coming from Orlando. The native whites rode dusty horses. The northern tourists chugged down the sandy village road in automobiles. The town knew the southerners and never stopped cane chewing when they passed. But the northerners were something else again. They were peered at cautiously from behind curtains by the timid. The more venturesome would come out on the porch to watch them go past and got just as much pleasure out of the tourists as the tourists got out of the village.
The front porch might seem a daring place for the rest of the town, but it was a gallery seat for me. My favorite place was atop the gatepost, proscenium box for a born first nighter. Not only did I enjoy the show, but I didn't mind the actors knowing that I liked it. I usually spoke to them in passing. I'd wave at them, and when they returned my salute, I would say something like this: "Howdy do? Well, I thank you. Where you going?" Usually the automobile or the horse paused at this, and after a queer exchange of compliments, I would probably go a piece of the way. With them, as we say in farthest Florida. If one of my family happened to come to the front in time to see me, of course, negotiations would be rudely broken off. But even so, it is clear that I was the first welcome to our state, Floridian. And I hope the Miami Chamber of Commerce will please to take notice.
During this period, white people differed from colored to me only in that they rolled through town and never lived there. They liked to hear me speak pieces and sing and wanted to see me dance and gave me generously of their small silver for doing these things, which seemed strange to me, for I wanted to do them as much as they needed to bribe me to stop, only they didn't know it. The colored people gave no dimes. They deplored any joyful tendencies in me, but I was their Zora, nevertheless. I belonged to them, to the nearby hotels, to the county, everybody's Zora. But changes came in the family when I was 13, and I was sent to school in Jacksonville. I left Eatonville, the town of the oleanders, a Zora. When I disembarked from the riverboat at Jacksonville, she was no more. It seemed that I had suffered a sea change. I was not Zora of Orange County anymore. I was now a little colored girl. I found it out in certain ways, in my heart as well as in the mirror. I became a fast brown, warranted not to rub nor run.
But I'm not tragically colored. There is no great sorrow dammed up in my soul, nor lurking behind my eyes. I do not mind at all. I do not belong to the sobbing school of Negrohood who hold that nature somehow has given them a low-down dirty deal and whose feelings are all but about it. Even in the helter-skelter skirmish that is my life, I have seen that the world is to the strong, regardless of a little pigmentation, more or less. No, I do not weep at the world. I am too busy sharpening my oyster knife.
Someone is always at my elbow reminding me that I am the granddaughter of slaves. It fails to register depression with me. Slavery is 60 years in the past. The operation was successful and the patient is doing well, thank you. The terrible struggle that made me an American out of a potential slave said, on the line. The Reconstruction said, get set. And the generation before said, go. I am off to a flying start and I must not halt in the stretch to look behind and weep. Slavery is the price I paid for civilization. And the choice was not with me. It is a bully adventure and worth it. All that I have paid through my ancestors for it. No one on earth ever had a greater chance for glory. The world to be won and nothing to be lost. It is thrilling to think, to know that for any act of mine, I shall get twice as much praise or twice as much blame. It is quite exciting to hold the center of the national stage with the spectators not knowing whether to laugh or to weep.
I do not always feel colored. Even now, I often achieve the unconscious Zora of Eatonville before the hedgerow. I feel most colored when I'm thrown against a sharp white background.
For instance, at Barnard, beside the waters of the Hudson, I feel my race. Among the 1,000 white persons, I'm a dark rock surged upon or swept over. But through it all, I remain myself. When covered by the waters, I am. And the ebb but reveals me again.
Sometimes it is the other way around. A white person is set down in our midst, but the contrast is just as sharp for me. For instance, when I sit in the drafty basement that is the New World Cabaret with a white person, my color comes. We enter chatting about any little nothing that we have in common and are seated by the jazz waiters. In the abrupt way that jazz orchestras have, this one plunges into a number.
It loses no time in circumlocutions, but gets right down to business. It constricts the thorax and splits the heart with its tempo and narcotic harmonies. This orchestra grows rambunctious, rears on its hind legs, and attacks the tonal veil with primitive fury, rending it, clawing it until it breaks through too. I dance wildly inside myself. I yell within. I whoop. I shake my assegai above my head. I hurl it true to the mark.
My face is painted red and yellow, and my body is painted blue. My pulse is throbbing like a war drum. I want to slaughter something. Give pain, death to what? I don't know. But the piece ends. The men of the orchestra wipe their lips and rest their fingers. I creep back slowly to the veneer we all call civilization with the last tone and find the white friend sitting motionless in his seat, smoking calmly.
Good music they have here, he remarks, drumming the table with his fingertips. Music. The great blobs of purple and red emotion have not touched him. He has only heard what I felt. He is far away, and I see him but dimly across the ocean and the continent that have fallen between us. He is so pale with his whiteness then, and I am so colored. Sometimes I feel discriminated against, but it does not make me angry. It merely astonishes me. How can any deny themselves the pleasure of my company? It's beyond me.
At a little over 5 feet tall, James Baldwin was an international literary giant. At his funeral in 1987 at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York, Toni Morrison said that his life was one that refuses summation and invites contemplation instead. One that combined a ruthless intelligence in identifying injustice with a profound pity for the frailties of human beings. He was as much a prophet as a novelist, essayist, and poet. His quotes, especially those concerning the lives of Black Americans, were eerily prescient. These are only a few.
I am what time, circumstances, history have made of me, certainly. But I am also much more than that. So are we all.
The power of the white world is threatened whenever a Black person refuses to accept the white world's definition.
I imagine that one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once the hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with pain.
The question I'm trying to raise is a very serious question. The mass media, television, and all the major news agencies endlessly use that word, looter. On television, you always see Black hands reaching in, you know? And so the American public concludes that the savages are trying to steal everything from us. And no one has seriously tried to get where the trouble is. After all, you're accusing a captive population who has been robbed of everything of looting. I think it's obscene.
If the American Black person is going to become a free person in this country, the people of this country have to give up something. If they don't give it up, it will be taken from them.
What one does realize is that when you try to stand up and look the world in the face like you have a right to be here, without knowing that this is the result of it, you have attacked the entire power structure of the Western world.
Ask any Mexican, any Puerto Rican, any Black man, any poor person. Ask the wretched how they fare in the halls of justice. And then you will know not whether a country is just or not, but whether or not it has any love for justice, any concept of it. It is certain in any case that ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have.
Everything now we must assume is in our hands. We have no right to assume otherwise. If, and now I mean the relatively conscious whites and the relatively conscious Blacks who must, like lovers, insist on or create the consciousness of the others, do not falter in our duty. We may be able, handful that we are, to end the racial nightmare and achieve our country and change the history of the world.
If we do not now dare everything, the fulfillment of that prophecy we recreated from the Bible and song by a slave is upon us. God gave Noah the rainbow sun. No more water. The fire next time.
We honor Black women writers who have beautifully celebrated themselves. Toni Morrison, unlike some who despise being labeled a Jewish writer, for instance, or a Southern writer, she did not mind being called a Black writer or a Black woman writer.
I've decided to define that rather than having it be defined for me. In the beginning, people would say, do you regard yourself as a Black writer or as a writer? And they also use the word woman with it, woman writer. So at first I was glib and said, I am a Black woman writer, because I understood that they were trying to suggest that I was bigger than that or better than that. I simply refused to accept their view of bigger and better. I really think the range of emotion and perceptions I have had access to as a Black person and as a female person are greater than those of people who are neither. I really do. So it seems to me that my world did not shrink because I was Black female writer. It just got bigger.
In 1982, poet, playwright Ntozake Shange published her novel Sassafras, Cypress, and Indigo. Here is a passage.
Where there is a woman, there is magic. If there is a moon falling from her mouth, she is a woman who knows her magic, who can share or not share her powers. A woman with the moon falling from her mouth, roses between her legs, and tiaras of Spanish moss. This woman is a consort of the spirits.
Alice Walker, best known as the author of the novel The Color Purple, is also an extraordinary poet and essayist. Here is her To Be a Woman.
To be a woman does not mean to wear a shroud. The feminine is not dead, nor is she sleeping. Angry? Yes. Seething? Yes. Biding her time? Yes. Yes.
In 2007, Jacqueline Jones Lamone interviewed poet Lucille Clifton. The interview was titled The Healing World of Lucille Clifton. Here is an excerpt.
In your work, you've been very candid about your life experiences. And as a woman who's endured so much of the intensity of everything, all the pain and the joy and everything in between, can you speak a bit about how the personal and the political meet and dance within your poetry?
You know something? I was just at a meeting today, and there were just two people of color there, myself and the guy who's the president of the group, and the others there were not. And one woman said something to me, and I said, why is it that when you say something about yourself, you're talking about yourself as a human? But when I talk about my life, it's political. And just because you say it doesn't mean it's so. That's the fact. That's the first thing about validity. A lot of women have borne a lot of things. A lot of people have borne a lot of things. There's a certain kind of human that I want to be. There is not shame in my life. There is certainly misfortune, but I'm not the only one. I do know that. And sometimes one of the things poetry can do is say to the audience, you are not alone. It can also speak for those who have not yet found their voice to speak. That's the part of the human condition. And if we're going to talk about humans, why are we just going to talk about the pretty ones?
As African Americans, we can never escape our history or the ways in which we see the world. For us, the land is inextricably linked to the person and to the past. Is this the premise beneath your poem In Mercy, which begins, surely I am able to write poems?
I was asked once to write about landscape and the beauty of the trees, but I cannot. I will not close part of my vision. I know what my history has been, and it is a history, it is a human history. Every time I see a tree, I know somebody used to hang on that. I'm not going to make others comfortable and not mention that. That's just the way I am. Now, I understand others, but I don't believe that as part of a poet, I'm here to make others feel good, feel happy. I'm supposed to chronicle what is. So, and it would be nice to forget history, but we do it at our own peril, as we have seen lately.
Do you see that we as African American poets have a certain responsibility? And if so, what would that be?
I suppose I would think it would be to tell the truth. And I'm not talking about the facts. I'm talking about the truth. Derek Walcott has a line. How can I say I saw what occurred and said nothing? That just makes other people happy. People have a hard time with me doing it because I don't seem to be a fire shouter. What you're asking me almost is why I am like I am. I haven't a clue. But I see no reason to not say what it is. So, one of the things I was seeing today at this meeting was also people, liberal people, saying, I'm just like them. And that makes them happy. But the truth is, they're just like me. And that's far from more difficult for them. Someone that said in the audience, a white person, Lucille would be very good if she wouldn't talk about race so much, if she would forget about race. And my response was, and I'll talk about race in a mixed group in a minute. Not only am I not going to forget it, but I'm not going to let you forget it. Do you wish me to forget my grandmother? I don't think so. You have no right.
We go back now to 1975, when For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough was first published in book form. The New Yorker magazine said it encompassed every feeling and experience a woman has ever had. It will be read and performed for generations to come. The critic said, here is a groundbreaking dramatic prose poem written in vivid and powerful language that resonates with unusual beauty in its fierce message to the world. Ntozake Shange writes with such exquisite care and beauty that anyone can relate to her message. In her play, Shange's character, Lady in Green, makes this plea.
Somebody, anybody, sing a black girl's song. Bring her out to know herself, to know you, but sing her rhythms. Karen, struggle, hard time. Sing her song of life. She's been dead so long, closed in silence so long. She doesn't know the sound of her own voice, her infinite beauty. She's half notes scattered without rhythm, no tune. Sing her sighs. Sing the song of her possibilities. Sing a righteous gospel. Let her be born. Let her be born and handled warmly.
Now, we invite the members of our literary family, whose invitations to the Christmas dinners of recognition invariably get lost in the mail. Or they are told unapologetically, you didn't get an invitation because you're not welcome. At the height of the civil rights movement, Black, gay, and lesbian writers' voices began to make themselves be heard as well. How long can you fight for civil rights and ignore ours? Whether you like it or not, admit it or not, we are your brothers, sisters, your aunts and uncles, your children, your grandchildren, and we've been here for centuries. Sato Saint, a writer, editor, performance artist, and highly outspoken AIDS activist, died of AIDS in 1994 at the age of 36. His poem, The March, is a literary landmark of a certain time in American history when thousands of creative artists of all ethnicities were lost to us. Sato Saint's The March.
Too young, let us not fall like cattle to redeem America's plaguing prejudices. Let us not fall. Let us savagely charge a country tempted by fascism. Our martyrdom is no false slaughter, but terror is a syndrome which can act up like bleeding black bulls. Too young, let us not fall like cattle to redeem America's plaguing prejudice. Let us not fall. Let us.
In June 1989, the brilliant Brooklyn-born poet Donald Woods self-published a poignant, stark, and heartbreakingly prophetic collection of work called The Space.
No point in crying injustice, shooting off in public places. They are slack-handed and wet-eyed with sympathy. Can confession aid the process? The fellowship of mourners, propping themselves up on heart-rending commiserations, brave corners bending, blank eyes staring. Time waits for no man, it comes for you alone. You spit, yank your flaccid member, cry envious tears for young folks caressing at your side. Strike back with amorphous ammunition. Refuse the paisley patterned despair. Take the violet in hand. Massage with the oils of your heart valve. Wash your battered spirit in the salty extract of self-pity. Shore up the heart for the thankless task of living. Breathe through your nose. Taste fruit with your tongue. Loiter at crosswalks while crowds pass by. And laugh at the rush of euphoria when your mother calls you from a sweaty sleep. Yawn loud. Make noise. Make love to the body you have. Now bathe it in African oils. Now dress it in royal cloth. Now lay it in a single bed and listen for it digesting raisins and bananas, full of yourself, ready to battle a raging fool. A venom-dripping mother lurks behind a green door of shame and pain and guilt. Fight back with stuff that lasts. The melody in your head that massages your insides. The name Jesus in repetition. Toenail polish on sandaled feet. Personal spinach. Spiritual broccoli. Call on herbs. Ginseng for the heartache. And sea moss coasts the lining of an empty stomach, hungry for full mouth kisses. Medicate the time, the hours, the moments, with a mantra that grows in your temples and radiates your fibers, your busy weekdays and quiet evenings. Your own arms against a sea of trouble. Take them, wrap them, round and round what belongs to you, and hold tight, hold tight, hold tight, gently. In this excerpt, Pat Parker, one of the most unflinchingly courageous voices of her generation, demands of her LGBTQ family, where will you be when society openly turns against us? Will you be willing to march, to fight back, or will you cower in the shadows?
Where will we all be when they come? And they will come.
They will come because we are defined as opposite, perverse, and we are opposite, perverse.
Every time we watched a queer hassled in the streets and said nothing, it was an act of perversion.
Every time we lied about the boyfriend or girlfriend at coffee break, it was an act of perversion.
Every time we heard, I don't mind the gays, but why must they be blatant? And said nothing, It was an act of perversion.
Every time we let a lesbian mother lose her child and did not fill the courtroom, it was an act of perversion.
Every time we let straights make out in our bars while we couldn't touch because of laws, it was an act of perversion.
Every time we heard, who I go to bed with is my personal choice. It's personal and not political, and said nothing, it was an act of perversion. Every time we let straight relatives bury our dead and push our lovers away, it was an act of perversion.
And they will come. They will come for the perverts.
And it won't matter if you're homosexual, not a faggot, lesbian, not a dyke, gay, not a queer.
It won't matter if you're Black, Chicano, Native American, Asian, or white.
It won't matter if you're from New York, Los Angeles, Galveston, or Sioux Falls.
It won't matter if you're butch or femme, not into roles, monogamous, non-monogamous.
It won't matter if you're Catholic, Baptist, atheist, Jewish, or MCC. They will come.
They will come to the cities and to the land.
To your front rooms and in your closets, they will come for the perverts. And where will you be when they come?
Where will you be when they come?
Where will you be when they come?
And where will you be when they come?
And where will you be when they come?
Audrey Lord, in her now classic autobiography, Zammy, speaks eloquently about being in a relationship in which the stark reality of life as a Black American woman informs one's ability to love and be loved.
Although the change from staying over to living together was a gradual one, I knew I had made a major decision. And I knew that decision would affect the rest of my life. Although exactly how was not really clear to me then. When I had moved into the apartment with Rhea, I had merely scratched my name beside hers on a slip of paper stuck into the slot of our mailbox in the hall. But one blustery day in the first week of April, on my lunch hour, I walked around the Heights Hardware on East Broadway and ordered a proper metal mailbox tag with Muriel's and my names upon it. I stood watching as the machine stamped two names into the tiny, shiny brass rectangle, feeling proud, excited, and a little bit scared. It felt like a ritual joining, a symbolic marriage. Afterward, I bought an egg cream on Chatham Square to celebrate and stood looking at the little shiny plate with our two names side by side, separated only by a little dash. This would be my surprise for Muriel when she came down to New York on her birthday the following week. No more playing house. For me, this was the real thing, a step from which there was no turning back. I wasn't just playing around anymore, gay girl, you know? I was living with a woman and we were lovers. I had done silently and easily what I had longed and feared to do. I had made a commitment which was irrevocable, without conscious articulation of why. I knew together meant forever for me, even though there was no troth plighted, no wedding ceremony, no paper sign. Muriel and I were united together by our loving and our wills, for good or ill. Through the spring, I had thought long and hard about whether or not I could live that closely with anyone and for the rest of my life, as I felt this was going to be, without question. Once I decided I could make that commitment, I never doubted for a minute that Muriel was the person I wanted to make it with.
I met the few of Muriel's friends that she could remember from the old days, and she met mine. There were Dottie and Polly, two skinny blonde artists from our neighborhood whom we met at L'Oreal's. B and Lynn, her new girl. Phyllis, who wanted to be an architect, but only talked about it when she was drunk. And of course, there was Felicia, my adopted little sister, as I called her, and the only other Black woman in our group. But the fact of our Blackness was an issue that Felicia and I talked about only between ourselves. Even Muriel seemed to believe that as lesbians, we were all outsiders and all equal in our outsiderhood. We're all niggers, she used to say. And I hated to hear her say it. It was wishful thinking based on little fact. The ways in which it was true languished in the shadow of those many ways in which it would always be false. When Mariel and I received stares and titters on the streets of the West Village or in the Lower East Side Market, it was a toss-up as to whether it was because we were a Black woman and a white woman together or because we were gay. Whenever that happened, I half agreed with Mariel. But I also knew that Felicia and I shared both a battle and a strength that was unavailable to our other friends. We acknowledged it in private, and it set us apart in a world that was closed to our white friends. It was even closed to Mariel, as much as I would have liked to include her. And because that world was close to them, it was easy for even lovers to ignore it, dismiss it, pretend it didn't exist, believe the fallacy that there was no difference between us all.
That difference was real and important, even if nobody else seemed to feel that way. Sometimes not even Flea herself, tired as she was of explaining why she didn't go swimming without a bathing cap or like to get caught in the rain. Between Muriel and me, then there was only one way in which I would always be separate, and it was going to be my own secret knowledge. If it was going to be my, I was Black and she was not. And that was a difference between us that had nothing to do with better or worse or the outside world's craziness. Over time, I came to realize that it colored our perceptions and made a difference in the ways I saw pieces of the world we shared. And I was going to have to deal with that difference outside of our relationship. This was the first separation, the peace outside love. But I turned away short of meaning, but I turned away short of the meanings of it, afraid to examine the truth difference might lead me to, afraid they might carry Muriel and me from each other. So I tried not to think about racial differences too often. I sometimes pretend to agree with Muriel that the difference did not in fact exist, that she and all gay girls were just as oppressed as any Black person, certainly any Black woman. Somehow I knew the difference would be a weapon in my arsenal when the time came. And the time would certainly come in one way or another. The time when I would have to protect myself alone, although I did not know how or when. For Flea and me, the forces of social evil were not theoretical, not long distance or solely bureaucratic. We met them every day. And even in our straight clothes, pain was always right around the corner. Difference had taught me that out of the mouth of my mother. And knowing that, I fancied myself on guard and safe. I tried to learn that knowing, I still had to learn that knowing was not enough.
Every one of the women in our group took for granted and would have said, if asked, that we were all on the side of right. But the nature of that right, everyone presumed to be on the side of, was always unnamed. It was just another way of silently avoiding having to examine what our living positions were within our small group of lesbians, dependent as we were upon each other for support. We were too afraid those differences might, in fact, be irreconcilable. For if we had never been taught any tools for dealing with them. Our individuality was very precious to each one of us, but so was the group and the other outsiders whom we have found to share some more social aspects of our loneliness.
Being gay girls without set roles was the one difference we allowed ourselves to see and to bind us together. We were not of that other world, and we wanted to believe that. By definition, we were therefore free of that other world's problems of capitalism, greed, racism, classism, etc. This was not so. But we continued to visit each other and eat together and, in general, share our lives and resources as if it were.
It should be no secret that Black LGBTQ people have been murdered not only because they're Black, but because they are Black and queer. And the treatment of these murders by so-called law enforcement has only mirrored the treatment of the overall Black community.
Award-winning young adult novelist, playwright, and poet Bil Wright's work, The Queen of Greenwich Village. Once anybody knows you're a witness to a crime, your whole life goes right down the drain. So I figure I'll write my book and send it to Oprah so she'll know the truth, and then everybody will. I'm between places to live right now, so I come and stand here like I did that night under this light at the corner of Christopher Street, across from the Hudson River, where they pulled her out. I work on my book called The Queen of Greenwich Village, about my friend, Marsha P. Johnson. I start out with the facts. 46 years old, born Malcolm Michaels Jr. The newspapers mostly identify her as a Black transvestite, also known as Marsha P. Johnson. But the real question I'm going to ask in my book is how whatever you want to call her, could walk right up to the cops in the street and say, "Why are you wasting time harassing gay people instead of arresting people who commit real crimes?" How could a person like that commit suicide? The night of Stonewall, she kicked and spit and called cops the real freaks before they threw her in jail, and the whole gay world called her a hero from that night on. Or as she used to say, "They called me the Queen of Greenwich Village." Is that somebody who commits suicide? When that boy saw her in the river and called the cops, why would they call it a suicide and close the case before anybody could ask any questions? Marsha used to say, "We're gonna be free real soon, girl. And there's light at the end of this damn tunnel, I promise." And I'd say, "You're crazy. Not as long as they've got all the power." And she'd say, "Maybe I won't be here laughing and crying in a blue satin dress with a slit up the side to show my fabulous legs. But it's gonna happen." And that's what I'm gonna write in my book. That anybody with that much hope doesn't take her own life. She loved living it too much. And even if those men in their uniforms with all the power sit on what really happens in the world, Marsha P. had her own truth. And that's the truth I'm going to put in my book. Then I'm going to send it to Oprah.
In No Name on the Street, James Baldwin wrote, "If one really wishes to know how justice is administered in a country, one does not question the policemen, the lawyers, the judges, or the protected members of the middle class. One goes to the unprotected, those precisely who need the law's protections the most, and listens to their testimony." Bil Wright's prose poem, "You Just Can't See All of Them," for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, read by the author.
The man was so big, it was hard for me to believe they could carry him. Him plus the coffin. The girls were smaller, say she was only 5 feet, 1 inch. I asked the woman next to me how she think a body 5 feet, 1 inch tall could take 8 bullets. Even so, both those coffins, they look huge to me, like they had about 20 people in each of them. It was hard for me to believe anybody could carry them. They brought them out, one after the other. The girl was first, then the man. Jimmy is about big as my wrist, but he was right there in the front. Eartha's even tinier, and she was right there with him. Of course, they put Malcolm on one side and Alvin on the other, with his arms spread out like mahogany wings, so that made it lighter. Tony wore a dress made for her from the pages of The Bluest Eye, and Diane was on the arm of Maya, who was on the arm of Bayard, wearing this coat of white lilies that spelled down the front of it, "We've been here before." The man was so big, it was hard for me to believe they could carry him. Him plus the coffin. The girls were smaller, say she was only 5 feet, 1 inch. Even so, both those coffins look huge to me, like they had about 20 people in each of them. And when they went by me, I saw they were made of glass, so the world could see. That's when Jimmy leaned over and said to me, "We got thousands carrying these two, baby. You just can't see all of them." And they put the 2 coffins on the water. And Aretha and the Abyssinia Baptist Church choir sang, "Mary, don't you weep. God's gonna trouble the water."
This is what Black writers have said about their journeys. Toni Morrison: "I am myself a storyteller and therefore an optimist, a firm believer in the ethical bend of the human heart, a believer in the mind's appetite for truth and its disgust with fraud and selfishness."
Zora Neale Hurston. In 1937, Their Eyes Were Watching God earned rave reviews. Hurston was featured in several newspaper profiles. When Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Edna St. Vincent Millay sent Hurston a telegram congratulating her on her new novel, Hurston said, "God does love Black people, doesn't he? Or am I just out on parole?"
Tubak Shakur: "There's nobody in the business strong enough to scare me. If God wanted to be quiet, he would have never showed me what he does. Out of anger comes controversy. Out of controversy comes conversation. Out of conversation comes action."
Lynn Nottage, winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Drama 2017. "I write about people who are marginalized because, as an African American woman, particularly now I am a middle-aged woman, I walk down the street and see people bump into me. To much of the population, I am invisible. I had one experience where I had my 2 children with me, and we were standing in line to pay, and this young white man stepped in front of me. I said, 'Excuse me,' and he said, 'Oh my God, I didn't see you there.' But he was speaking on a much larger basis than that. He didn't recognize my presence, and I think that is why I write the stories I write. However, to paraphrase Zora Neale Hurston, we are not a tragic people. And as the grand griot Maya Angelou wrote in the other Black national anthem,
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise.
Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise.
Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lower eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries.
Does my haughtiness offend you? Do you take it awful hard? Cause I laugh like I got gold mines digging in my own backyard.
You may shoot me with words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still I rise.
Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs?
Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide.
Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise.
Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise.
Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave.
I rise.
I rise.
I rise.
If there is healing in reading at this time, and I hope that there is, I ask you to read not just these writers, but the hundreds of voices that shed light on what it is to be Black in America. Thank you for being with us. I'm Bil Wright, and Black Writers Matter.
I'm gonna write my stories down. Ain't nobody gonna stop me now. Keeping my eyes on the prize, holding on. Holding on, I'm holding on, keeping my eyes on the prize, holding on.
Keeping my eyes on, I'm gonna write my stories down. Ain't nobody gonna stop me now. I got my eyes on the prize. I'm holding on. Got my eyes on the prize, and I'm holding